Imagine if I told you the most dangerous individual in a room is not the loudest, but the silent figure in the corner who has reached their breaking point. Stay with me, because what Carl Jung uncovered about human psychology may completely transform your view of empaths. Jung believed that each person carries both light and shadow within them. This duality is perhaps most visible in the often misunderstood empath. Many confuse empathy with fragility, but Jung's findings reveal something far more intricate and potentially unsettling. Have you ever been mistaken for being too sensitive? Comment 1. If others have underestimated your strength because of your empathy. Comment 2. If you've ever misjudged someone else's quiet nature. Most people overlook a crucial truth about empaths, and by the end, you'll see why underestimating them is a mistake. According to Carl Jung, the human psyche functions across several layers. The persona, or outward mask, hides our authentic self. But what happens when someone with exceptional emotional intelligence takes off that mask? Jung's revelations about the shadow self are nothing short of startling. Empaths exist in what Jung described as the tension of opposites. They experience emotions intensely but have mastered the art of restraint. They can detect deception yet still choose to believe in the potential goodness of others. This is not naivete. It is what Jung called the transcendent function, the capacity to hold opposing truths at the same time. Here's where it becomes dangerous, and why narcissists should be concerned. Jung asserted that the most psychologically complete individuals are those who have confronted their shadow and emerged whole. Empaths, through enduring repeated betrayal and manipulation, are often compelled into this integration process sooner and more intensely than others. They do not merely comprehend light, they are intimately acquainted with darkness, having been driven into it. Narcissists view the empath's compassion as weakness, making a critical error in judgment. They assume they are dealing with someone fragile and easily controlled. Yet Jung found that those who lead with their hearts often have the most resilient psychological foundations because they have been forced to build them in order to survive. Pay close attention to what follows, because this is where the situation reverses entirely. According to Jung's theory of individuation, every individual must eventually face their true self. For many, this is a slow process if it happens at all. But for betrayed empaths, this evolution accelerates sharply. Their pain becomes the driving force behind what Jung termed psychological rebirth. Have you ever had pain transform you into someone stronger? Comment 1 if you've experienced personal growth through hardship. Comment 2 if you believe strength can be built without suffering. Jung understood something that most overlook: emotional sensitivity is not a flaw. It is advanced pattern recognition. Empaths do more than simply feel emotions. They interpret, examine, and retain them. Each act of manipulation, deceit, or emotional harm is recorded in their mind, not as resentment, but as valuable information. Once that reservoir of information reaches its tipping point, something occurs that Jung called the emergence of the self, and it is utterly unstoppable. Jung found that the most profound transformations arise not in comfort, but in crisis. He referred to this as enantiodromia, the tendency for things to reverse into their opposites when pushed to extremes. The patient empath becomes immovable. The generous one becomes discerning. The forgiving one becomes absolute. This transformation is not about becoming harsh or heartless. Jung recognized that real strength appears when a person integrates their shadow, when they embrace their ability to set boundaries, refuse requests, and walk away when necessary. The empath does not lose their compassion. Instead, they develop a firm backbone. What happens next is truly remarkable. Carl Jung distinguished between being unconsciously reactive and consciously responsive. Most individuals function from their unhealed wounds, lashing out seeking revenge, or trying to inflict the same pain they've endured. The evolved empath, however, acts from what Jung described as conscious choice. They feel no need to destroy their betrayer because they have already triumphed in the most significant battle, the one within. Jung maintained that the greatest victory lies not in defeating others, but in overcoming the aspects of oneself that would sink to their level. This is the moment when the narcissist recognizes their grave miscalculation. Jung noted that manipulators depend on predictable responses they require you to pursue, to justify, to battle for the connection. But once an empath achieves what Jung termed psychological autonomy, they become impervious to such strategies. They exit the game altogether. Jung found that the strongest stance in any interaction is detachment that comes from clarity, not withdrawal stemming from fear. The awakened empath doesn't step away out of pain. They do so because they now perceive the truth with precision. What follows will transform your understanding of power dynamics. Jung's research into psychological types showed that empaths exhibit what he called feeling function dominance. This does not indicate emotional weakness. It is a sign of refined emotional intelligence. They can discern unspoken meanings, detect inconsistencies, and recognize manipulation before it fully develops. Yet here's the twist Jung pointed out. When this emotional intelligence merges with wisdom gained through hardship, it produces something entirely new. The empath ceases reacting impulsively and begins operating with strategy. They no longer function from a place of pain, but from a place of power. The transformation that follows is so profound that Jung gave it a specific name, the transcendent function. It is the capacity to endure tension without breaking, to perceive truth without growing bitter, and to choose deliberate responses over impulsive reactions. An empath who has been shaped by the fires of betrayal develops this transcendent function at a depth few ever attain. They achieve what Jung called individuation, being complete in themselves. They no longer require outside approval to recognize their value, nor do they depend on others to confirm their perceptions. They free themselves from reliance on anyone who fails to honor their depth. Here's the part that may give you chills. Carl Jung described a concept called psychological mirroring, in which empaths instinctively reflect back whatever others project onto them. Yet after repeated betrayals, something changes. They stop merely reflecting and begin exposing the truth. They pierce through charm manipulation and insincere apologies, observing the recurring patterns with perfect clarity. Rather than absorbing the dysfunction, they reflect it back, not out of spite, but through truth. Jung found that truth is the most potent weapon against deception. The following stage, which Jung referred to as the return of the repressed, alters everything. Jung understood that when someone buries their genuine power for an extended period, it eventually surfaces, not in disorder, but in pure, unwavering clarity. The empath who once embodied patience, understanding, and accommodation suddenly becomes unshakable. They stop arguing and simply decide. They no longer justify themselves, they act. They cease trying to mend what is beyond repair and instead withdraw from the situation entirely. This shift is not an act of cruelty. It is, in Jung's words, individuation in action. Here's where the psychology becomes especially compelling. Jung asserted that the shadow harbors not only our darkness, but also our unrealized potential. In empaths, the shadow frequently holds their capacity to set boundaries, to refuse, and to walk away. Betrayal compels them to integrate this shadow, reclaiming aspects of themselves they had long kept concealed. Jung discovered that integrating the shadow does not diminish compassion, it heightens discernment. They do not cease caring. Rather, they choose more intentionally where their care is invested. They come to see their empathy as sacred, never to be dispensed recklessly. Do you think empathy should have boundaries? Comment 1 if you believe empathy should always be freely given. Comment 2 if you believe it should be offered selectively. What follows is the rise of what Jung termed the individuated self, an unstoppable force. Jung stated that the most formidable individuals are not those acting from unhealed wounds, but those who have converted their pain into wisdom. The awakened empath is the embodiment of this truth. They have descended into the depths of human cruelty and surfaced not shattered but refined. They grasp manipulation because they have endured it. They identify gaslighting because they have freed themselves from it. They detect emotional predators because they have been depleted by them. This is not paranoia. It is what Jung referred to as hard-earned discernment. And this is the turning point where everything changes for good. In Carl Jung's theory of psychological development, there is a pivotal moment when a person ceases searching for fulfillment outside themselves and becomes whole from within. For the betrayed empath, this moment is both a liberation and a personal revolution. They no longer attempt to persuade others of their value, justify their boundaries, or apologize for their needs. They attain what Jung referred to as psychological sovereignty, full mastery over their emotional life. The final stage, which Jung named the return to the self, is nothing short of extraordinary. Jung found that genuine strength is not the lack of sensitivity, but sensitivity that has been tempered and refined by wisdom. The fully awakened empath exemplifies this paradox flawlessly. They experience emotions profoundly, yet choose their love with care. They understand thoroughly, but interact with caution. They forgive entirely, but never erase the memory. Jung maintained that the most complete individuals are those who can maintain conscious awareness of both their light and their shadow. The transformed empath has mastered the art of being gentle with those who merit kindness and firm with those who demand boundaries. They have achieved mastery of what Jung called the appropriate response, the last element that renders them truly untouchable, according to Jung, is reaching the highest stage of psychological growth when a person no longer depends on others for their sense of completeness. The awakened empath arrives at this state not by withdrawing from life, but by integrating all parts of themselves. Their wholeness comes not from avoiding the world, but from deliberately deciding where and how they belong in it. They stop trying to save those who prefer to remain in despair. They no longer pursue individuals who continually flee. They refuse to keep investing their light into people who are nothing more than black holes in disguise. They have mastered what Jung called the art of conscious relationship, choosing to connect only where mutual respect, reciprocity, and sincere care exist. The outcome is what Jung referred to as the individuated empath, one of the most powerful forces imaginable. Jung stated that when a person has integrated their shadow, confronted their inner demons, and emerged whole, they become a force of nature not destructive but unstoppable, not aggressive but utterly assured. The fully awakened empath has no desire for revenge, having risen above that need. They feel no compulsion to prove their worth because they already know it deeply. They do not fear solitude, for they have learned to be their own best companion. They embody what Jung described as psychologically complete individuals, those who have turned their most painful wounds into their strongest assets. Their danger lies not in aggression, but in the fact that they can no longer be manipulated, dominated, or shattered. According to Jung's lifelong research, this is the most frightening reality. A narcissist can encounter a person who has learned to love themselves with the same intensity they once devoted to loving others. The empath's progression from victimhood to sovereignty is more than personal change. It is what Jung described as the psyche's hero's journey. They venture into darkness, confront their shadows, reclaim their power, and emerge not merely healed, but sanctified. Jung found that suffering, when consciously acknowledged and processed, becomes the foundation for wisdom. The empath, who has endured the flames of hardship, does more than survive. They become a beacon, guiding others out of their own darkness. They stand as living evidence of Jung's profound insight. Within every wound exists the seed of transcendence, and within every betrayal lies the opportunity to grow more authentic, powerful, and whole than ever before. This is the essence of the awakened empath's psychology. Once you grasp it, you will never again underestimate the quiet strength of someone who has turned pain into power wounds, into wisdom, and profound suffering into their ultimate strength. Has this changed the way you see empaths? Comment 1 if you now see them as powerful and unshakable. Comment 2 if you already believed this before reading. Thank you for accompanying me on this exploration. If you gained insight from today's discussion, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this message with someone who could benefit from it.